Jaya Radha Madhava Kunda Vihari Gopi Janamala Bhagirivara Dhari Yashoda Nandana Vraja Janarandana Yamuna Kiranachari Jaya Radha Madhava Kunja Vihari Gopi Janamala Bhagirivara Dhari Yashoda Nandana Vraja Janarandana Yamuna Kiranachari Jaya Radha Madhava Kunja Vihari Gopi Janamala Bhagirivara Dhari Yashoda Nandana Vraja Janarandana Yamuna Kiranachari Hare Krishna, Krishna Krishna, Hare Hare, Hare Rama, Hare Rama, Rama Rama, Hare Hare. Hare Krishna, Hare Krishna, Krishna Krishna, Hare Hare, Hare Rama, Hare Rama, Rama Rama, Hare Hare. Hare Krishna, Krishna Krishna, Hare Hare, Hare Rama, Rama Rama, Hare Hare. Hare Krishna, Krishna Krishna, Hare Hare, Hare Rama, Rama Rama, Hare Hare. Krishna Krishna, Hare Hare, Hare Rama, Hare Rama, Rama Hare Hare.
chapter 10, texts 22 through 26. We have a bunch of verses with no purports. So I'll read 22, 3, 4, and 5, and then we can chant 26 together. Gaurajo Manisha Krishna Sukaro Gavayoru Dvishapa Pashavasche Me Avir Utsascha Sattama. O purest Vidura, of the lower animals, the goat, the cow, goat, buffalo, Krishna stag, hog, Gavaya animal, deer, lamb, and camel all have 2 hooves. Cloven hooves. Gadasvasvataro gaura, Shaurabhaschamari tata, Ete chaika shapak chakta, Shunu pancha nakam pashun. The horse, mule, ass, gaura, deer, Shadab, a bison, and wild cow all only have 1 hoof. Now you may hear from me about the animals who have 5 nails. Shvasragalo, Vriko, Yagro, Marjara, Shashasalakao, Singhakapir Gajas Kurmo, Godhacha Makaradaya. The dog, jackal, tiger, fox, cat, rabbit, sajada, lion, monkey, elephant, tortoise, alligator, rosapa, etc. all have 5 nails in their claws. They are known as panchanakas, or animals having 5 nails. Kanka gridha bhakasyena bhasabalukavarina Hamsasarasa chakrabha kakolu kadaya kagha. The heron, vulture, crane, hawk, bhasa, bhaluka, peacock, swan, sadasa, chakravakra, crow, owl, and others are the birds. And text 26, 6. Arvak, Shrotas, Tu, Navamaha, Arvak Shrotas Tu Navamaha, Shattar, Ekavidho, Nrinam, Shattar Ekavidho Nrinam, Rajo, Dhika, Karmapara, Rajo Dhika Karmapara, Dhuke, Cha, Shuka, I'm sorry, it's Sukha, Manina, and Dhuke Cha Sukha Manina, Arvak Shrotas Tu Navamaha, Shattareka Vidho Nrinam, Rajodhika Karmapara, Dhuke Cha Sukhamanina, Arvak Shrotas Tu Navamaha, Shattareka Vidho Nrinam, Rajodhika Karmapara, Dhuke Cha Sukhamanina. Others, please. Arvak,
Arvak,
downwards,
downwards,
Shodaha,
Shodaha,
passage of food,
passage of food,
to,
but,
Navamaha,
Namaha,
the ninth,
the ninth,
Kshattaha,
Shataha,
Ovidura,
Ovidura,
Ekavidha,
Ekavya,
one species,
one species,
Nranam,
Nyanam,
of human beings,
human beings,
Raja,
Raja,
the mode of passion,
the mode of passion,
Adhikaha,
Adhikara,
very prominent,
very prominent,
Karmapara,
Kamapara,
interested in working,
interested in working,
Vihuke,
Duke,
in misery,
in misery,
Cha,
Cha,
but,
but,
Sukha,
Sukha,
happiness,
happiness,
Manina,
Manina,
thinking.
thinking.
Translation. The creation of the human beings who are of one species only and who stock their eatables in the belly is the ninth in the rotation. In the human race, the mode of passion is very prominent. Humans are always busy in the midst of miserable life, but they think themselves happy in all respects. Responsibly, please. The creation of the human beings
The creation of human beings
who are of one species only
who are one species only,
and who stock their eatables in the belly
and who stock their eagles in the belly,
is the ninth in the rotation.
is the ninth in the rotation.
In the human race,
In the human race,
the mode of passion is very prominent.
the mode of passion is very prominent.
Humans are always happy.
Humans are always busy.
Thank you. Humans are always busy
Humans are always busy
in the midst of miserable life,
in the midst of miserable life,
but they think themselves happy in all respects.
but they think themselves happy in all respects.
Srila Prabhupada's purport. The human being is more passionate than the animals, and thus the sex life of the human being is more irregular. The animals have their due time for sexual intercourse, but the human being has no regular time for such activities. The human being is endowed with a higher advanced stage of consciousness for getting relief from the existence of material miseries. But due to his ignorance, he thinks that his higher consciousness is meant for advancing in the material comforts of life. Thus, his intelligence is misused in the animal propensities, eating, sleeping, defending, and mating, instead of spiritual realization. By advancing in material comforts, the human being puts himself into a more miserable condition. But illusioned by the material energy, he always thinks himself happy, even while in the midst of misery. Such misery of human life is distinct from the natural, comfortable life enjoyed even by the animals. Om Jnana Timirantasya Jnananjana Shalakaya Chakshurunmilitam Jena Tasmai Shri Gurave Namaha Mukam Karoti Vachalam Pangum Langhayate Girim Yatkripātamam Vande Shri Gurum Dinataram Shri Chaitanya Mano Vishtam Stapitam Yena Bhutale Swayam Rupa Gadamayam Dadati Swapadantikam Vancha Kalpatarubhyascha Kripa Sindhobhya Eva Cha Patitanam Pavanebhyo Vaishnavebhyo Om. Arvakshlotas tu Navamaha Shatare Kavidho Nam Rajodhika Karma Pala Nuke Chasukmani. The creation of the human beings who are of one species only and who stock their eatables in the belly is the ninth in the rotation. In the human race, the mode of passion is very prominent. Humans are always busy in the midst of miserable life, but they think themselves happy in all respects. So, having gone through all these other classes of species of life, all these different creations of Brahma, we arrive at the human species. And the description is, well, quite apt, especially if we look at our culture nowadays. We stock our eatables in our belly. We're prone to gluttony. We say, sometimes we make fun of the squirrels for stashing their nuts and acorns and whatever it is. But they're actually stashing for the winter. We've heard this old Aesop's fable about the wisdom of the squirrels as well. But we stalk like crazy for nothing, and we put it away. We eat not because we need nourishment, but we eat because there's something missing in our hearts, something missing in our souls. So we eat our misery, but we eat things that we think are delicious, so we think that's great. And the more I can get of it, the better. And it's the same with everything. The more clothes I can get, the better. The bigger house I can get, the better. So we see these neighborhoods in the suburbs of many large cities around the U.S. with these mansions. Enormous houses that take up the entire lot they were built on. There's no yard. And they're cool inside. There's lots of rooms, lots of room in lots of rooms, and all kinds of stuff to do. But who can really afford to maintain something like that? The electricity and gas bills must be insane. Property taxes, in many places, a lot of places don't have sales taxes. They do have property. Usually the property taxes can be pretty awful. Keeping the place clean. We know how hard it is to keep our little spaces clean and neat. Just crazy. Gotta have more cars. I remember once when I was teaching at San Diego State University, there's the campus bookstore, and then there's an off-campus bookstore at most college campuses. And at San Diego, it's the off-campus bookstore is KB Books, and it's a place where you can get more used books, more used textbooks. You might get a little, you might save a little bit on the textbooks. A little bit sometimes adds up to a lot. There are textbooks that cost a couple $100 in math and sciences and stuff. It's a cycle I'm glad to be out of. Having students giving me stink eye every year because of every semester because of the cost of their books. It's like the cheapest books I can that I think will do the job. So I was at KB Books placing an order for, I guess, the next semester, and there was this big poster on the wall. And there was this huge house up on a knoll above a garage, and I think the garage had 5 or 6 cars, and they're all like super luxury cars, a Lamborghini, a Ferrari, whatever, a whole bunch of them. And the caption on the poster said, "The justification for higher education." Well, I don't have to go through a book. But that is how this stuff is sold. And this is a big part of the problem. Srila Prabhupada focuses, especially in the first part of his purport, on our gluttony for sex. This is prominent. And you would think that sex wouldn't need to be advertised. But not only do we use sex to advertise, but we advertise sexual connection and sexual pleasure, sexual licentiousness. I guess I don't see that many ads nowadays because I don't watch any television. But you do see ads if you get on Facebook or some websites that you're not paying for, news sites or something like that. You'll see ads. And then you get weird ads. If you do get on Facebook, you get those weird ads over on the side, little things that sponsor. Click on me. No, thank you. that to my algorithm. But it's everywhere. It's just everywhere. We use sex to sell beer. You would think you wouldn't need to use sex to sell beer, but if you tell people, guys, if they drink Budweiser Light, they'll have abs like, well, I don't know, who pick your favorite movie star with abs or whatever. And you'll be surrounded by bikini models or something. Now, that's not how it works. You drink a lot of beer, you have to buy bigger pants every once in a while. And you're likely just to spend your time in your basement or your man cave or wherever with your bros watching the game. Just not how it works. So, it's everywhere we go, we're constantly confronted with, you should be enjoying like this, you should be enjoying like that. This advertising industry is so pernicious, so evil. A friend of mine got into advertising for some time and made considerable money. And I thought, because I can write, I thought maybe I should get into advertising, learn to write ad copy, and maybe make some money on the side with my teaching, which didn't pay much. And he told me frankly, quite frankly, I asked him for tips and he just shut me down. He says, Baruch, this would not make you happy. This would make you miserable. And so we see this, always busy in the midst of miserable life, but they think themselves happy in all respects. You go on the streets, and there's just, the traffic is so thick. I was the faculty advisor to the Student Honor Society when I was teaching at Hawaii Community College in Hilo, and we would have an annual state convention of this Phi Theta Kappa at a different community college campus around the state. So one year we had it at Hawaii Community College. At Kapiolani Community College, where it used to be Fort Ruger, kind of on the other side of Diamond Head. Quite a lovely campus. And we had a speaker from the international headquarters, Tennessee or someplace. But before she addressed us, she had a question. She leaned over the lectern and said, I just have a question that's just been burning at me. How do y'all get so many cars on this little bitty island? Well, it's easy. It's the mode of passion. We think we have to have more. And we think we have to run here and there all the time, getting stuff to satisfy our senses. But then we see that things don't really do that. And I think probably the chief example, which we see here at the beginning of this purport, is sex. Most people, if they get some pleasure out of sex, they think they need to have more. They think they need to have more partners. And that just, all these desires. This is part of the Buddha's teachings. The first noble truth is the truth of suffering. That there is suffering in this world. Sometimes it's really nasty misery, and sometimes it's just inconvenience, as I've discussed before. But it's suffering. And where does that suffering come from? Krishna tells us in the Bhagavad Gita. It comes from our thirst, our desires. So Buddha says, the Buddha's second noble truth is, we suffer because of Krishna, because of a thirst to enjoy in this world. So, and Krishna says in Bhagavad Gita, Dukkha yonai evate. These desires literally are the womb from which our suffering is born. So we're always running around chasing something. We're running around chasing food. We're running around chasing partners. We're running around chasing waves. Srila Prabhupada pointed this out to us a couple times. Sometimes with a little chuckle, with a little wry smile. Sometimes not so much. But this is our situation in the material world. This is our culture. And we're burning and flooding this little planet in our attempts to enjoy more and more. We're just creating a more miserable condition. But because I have, I have an iPhone 13 XEL KP or whatever they are, and a brand new MacBook Pro with a bazillion gigabytes on the solid state drive, and it's super fast, and I can do all kinds of cool things on it, play all sorts of video games. We think that's happiness. But if the video games really made us happy, they really satisfied us, there wouldn't be this compulsion to play them constantly. We have to keep getting new hits of whatever little hormone it is that we get, if we kill a bad guy or a good guy, because a lot of people like to play bad guys, I guess, in video games. I've never gone near video games. I have a story about that. I had a neighbor, a devotee who lived across the street, actually shared an apartment with my friend Dravida. His name is Divigyan. He was a disciple of Lokanath Maharaj's, and he was a civil engineer. So this was early 90s. And he had a laptop computer with 4 gigabytes of RAM, which was just unthinkable in the early 90s. Just, how do you do that? Well, he's a civil engineer. He needed all that power to do all the 3D stuff that they have to do, So I was over speaking with him in Dravida one day, and Divigyan took me in to show me his computer, and then he pulled up Doom, this big video game that was very popular at the time. It may still be, I don't know. And he was showing me Doom and how it works, and I just thought, I am never going near a video game, because I have 3 jobs, plus my sadhana, plus service at the temple, plus hanging out with my family, plus getting exercise so that I don't die young. And if I start playing these things, my life is simply over. There wouldn't be time for any of the things that I need to do. And would I actually be satisfied? No, it's just like these constant adrenaline hits. You gotta get more, you gotta get more. And then the advertising makes it even worse. It exacerbates the problem. To an extent that it's, that if we think about it, it kind of collapses our minds. This is not what human life is meant for. Srila Prabhupada says the human being is endowed with a higher advanced stage of consciousness for getting relief from the existence of material miseries. We're supposed to be able to learn to see through these things. But by our association, the people that we hang out with, the advertising that we expose, that we immerse ourselves in sometimes. I mean, some people watch the Super Bowl not for the game, but for that half hour of new ads, because so many of them are so clever. And so we throw ourselves, we immerse ourselves in advertising. And it's no wonder we can't see straight. We think, whatever it is, I've got to have more. But Krishna tells us, Krishna tells us in the Bhagavad Gita, in the 6th chapter, when he's talking about yoga, focuses on yoga. Arjuna wants to be a yogi, right? And Krishna's trying to convince him, well, there's another kind of yogi you can be other than going to the forest and meditating in a cave yogi. And then he starts explaining what it's about. And so he says, Yukta Harihadasi Yukta Chesisa Karmasu Yukta Swapna Svapnavabodhasya Yoga Bhavati. We can mitigate all the pains of material life by practicing the yoga system. And that means, in part, being temperate or regulated in our habits of eating, sleeping, working, and recreation. And that would include, sex as well. So it's good to have some time to go swim in the ocean, go have some fun, to decompress or whatever. That if you do that in a regulated way, not in a self-indulgent way, that's healthy. It's healthy to get enough sleep so that you can function during the day, so that your body can heal itself at night, so that your brain can process all the stuff that went on during the day. That's healthy. But lying in bed until 11 o'clock in the morning or 1 o'clock in the afternoon, and especially because we got home at 2:30 in the morning or something like that, that's not healthy. That's not healthy. And the same thing with eating. We eat at particular times. The yogis eat at particular times, and they eat particular foods that are conducive to their practice. Srila Prabhupada points out elsewhere in the 6th chapter that when Krishna tells Arjuna that celibacy is a requirement for yoga. You're going to hear that in any yoga class? Down in Waikiki in some gym in Waikiki or something like that? No, man, it's Lululemon time or whatever. They're not going to tell your students, well, if you really want to be a good yogi, you have to be celibate. And Srila Prabhupada points out in one of the in that purport that Bhakti Yoga is the only yoga system that allows for sex. And that is regulated. That's confined to marriage. Or for Pete's sake, at least a committed monogamous relationship. And ideally, it's used for creating good children. But at least a regulated way. You don't go nuts like the rest of your life is your honeymoon or something. All these things, if we do them in a regulated way, they act, especially in Bhakti Yoga, we can even engage in sex in a regulated way, in a decent way, I guess. I don't know. And become elevated, because Krishna says that sex life that's engaged in according to regulated principles, that's him. That's as good as him. So these things aren't bad inherently. Eating, sleeping, mating, fighting, or defending. However you conceive of defending. Sometimes we just defend our false ego. How dare you? So, don't you know who I am? Sometimes you hear that. Do you know who I am? So we're always defending something. These things aren't bad inherently, but if we get lost in them, as we do, particularly, and it seems progressively to be the case, more and more. We always say this, we say, oh, the kids these days. And our parents, they say, oh, kids these days in their music, whatever. And their parents probably said, oh, the kids in their jitterbug. And but it does seem like we become more and more steeped in this. Now, maybe the last couple of years, I saw that there was a poll that said that single men have, maybe it's men, shucks, I just saw the headline, have decided since the pandemic began that sex is less important than they thought it was before the pandemic. But food and Netflix or something like that, and those things are booming. This is the culture that we find ourselves in, and how could we possibly rise to the standard that we see, like at the very beginning of the Nectar of Instruction. A number of us are planning on beginning to study the Nectar of Instruction next month. And Rupa Goswami just starts out, this is a really wonderful little book, 11 verses. We go from, bite your tongue and sit on your hands to Radha Kund in 11 verses. And quite wonderful.
Jai, Srimad.
Going down. So, most of us are familiar with this verse that Srila Rupa Goswami begins this text with. Ashravegam masa prodhavegam jihavegam udaro vastavegam itan vegam yo vishaheta dhira sarvam apimam prativing sasishya. A sober person can tolerate the urge to speak, the mind's demands, the actions of anger, and the urges of the tongue, belly, and genitals. If someone can do that, they're qualified to make disciples all over the world. They can teach Bhakti Yoga all over the world. Now, these are kind of pretty objective things that we can, that you can pretty much check on. And Srila Prabhupada addresses each of these in turn. He says the first thing we need to learn to control is speech. And then Krishna explains in the 17th chapter of the Bhagavad Gita austerities of speech. When Raghunath Das Goswami was approaching Lord Chaitanya Mahaprabhu, once he escaped his family life and went to Puri, and got Lord Chaitanya's company as he had desired for so long, then he was asking Lord Chaitanya, please, give me some special instruction, please. And finally, Lord Chaitanya said, okay. Don't wear fancy clothes. Don't eat fancy food. Don't gossip. Everything else, Swarup Damodar can instruct you. So he put him under the care of Swarup Damodar. So he was called Swarupera Raghu. Raghunath, who was Swarup's Raghu. Simple, it sounds like simple, really basic instructions. So, when Srila Prabhupada talks about controlling sex in this purport, by the time we get there, we've gone through so many things, including what we hear. That's really important as well. There's a long section in the purport on hearing transcendental literature. And we know that the Bhagavatam can purify the heart. Hearing the Rasa Lila even from the proper source with the proper attitude actually uproots the hridaroga in the heart, the lust in the heart. If we approach it with the proper attitude and we hear from the proper source. So Srila Prabhupada says, as far as the urges of the genitals are concerned, there are two: proper and improper, legal or illicit sex. When a man is properly mature, he can marry according to the rules and regulations of the Shastras and use his genitals for begetting nice children. That is legal and religious, and then he gets into the other things. But the main thing is, how do we control our urge to eat? How do we control our urge to speak? How do we control our urge to collect, which is one of the faults that we see a couple verses later in the Upadeshamrita, in the Nectar of Instruction. Collecting more than necessary stuff. And they used to have a reality show. I don't know if they still do, but I remember seeing this when I was at my daughter Lali's, called Hoarders. And they would go in and do an intervention and try to help these people empty their houses of the things that were that were stacked up to the rafter, including, dishes that had been left, food containers that had been left there sometimes for years. It was pretty strange. Not to mention their garage or whatever, we can control all these things by finding good association and engaging our senses. This is what Bhakti Yoga is about. Engaging the senses in the service of the master of the senses. That's the definition that we get of Uttama Bhakti or Shuddha Bhakti, pure devotional service, right at the beginning of the Bhakti Rasamrita Sindhu. And if, we have, to the extent that we have a desire to do this, we're able. Krishna says, when Krishna explains to Arjuna the process of yoga, the system of yoga in the 6th chapter of the Gita, Arjuna says it's impossible. It's like trying to control the wind. And Krishna says, yes. Radhesha pointed this out yesterday. Yes, it is difficult. But he says it is possible by two things. Practice and detachment. Abhyasena vairagya. These two things make it possible. So we detach ourselves from these, from whatever, to some extent, and we do it gradually. We're not advocating that anybody hurt themselves practicing Bhakti Yoga. People do hurt themselves practicing Hatha Yoga. But we shouldn't hurt ourselves practicing Bhakti Yoga because it's susukha kartamavya. It's everlasting and it's joyfully performed. What's the Hawaiian word? Hanahaoli. It's joyful work. I saw a bumper sticker when I was going out to do some errands a couple of weeks ago. It said Hanahaoli, joyful work. And I thought, oh, I like that. Susukam kartamavya. So Bhakti Yoga is like that. It's practical, it's user-friendly, and and we engage according to our capacity. We always want to stretch just a little bit, just like with any endeavor. We want to just go a little beyond our comfort zone so that we continue to grow. Okay, I'll stop there. Any quick questions or comments?
Quick comment.
Saropa.
There are some about the people who collect things in others. So many people died because they couldn't get out of their house. Now it's considered a mental disease.
Yeah, I had an uncle who, unknown to us, hoarded newspapers. He was a brilliant engineer, really, really smart guy. But when he died, untimely, unexpectedly anyway, not untimely, but unexpectedly, he went into his house. It's like filled with newspapers. He just never threw away a newspaper for decades, maybe. I don't know. Yeah, and it's something's missing. Just like we see with homeless people, they collect any darn thing. And they hold on to it like crazy because they don't have anything. So we see them in their with their shopping carts full of stuff. And what they're trying to fill, as it turns out, is a God-shaped hole in their heart. Sometimes you read God-sized hole in their heart. Whoa, that's really a task. And it doesn't work. It just doesn't work. And so that's our sad condition, that we think we're happy because my car is comfortable, even though I'm stuck, well, not so much here for 2.5 hours, but even though may have to have a 2.5 hour commute, because I have a BMW with a top-notch sound system and air conditioning. I'm cool. I'm fine. It's okay. Got my little scene on my way to work. It's not a thing. It's just part of it. And we think that makes us happy. And we get to work and they say, hey, how you doing today, buddy? Oh, great. I'm ready to roll. And then 2.5 hours back. So we're busy in our misery. Busy trying to put Band-Aids over our hurts. And they don't always work. Thank you for that. Anything else? We're going to throw out to Srimad Bhagawatam.